Good morning. Today is that means it's another morning for the Kitchings Table. Good morning. I'm Earl Kitchings, your host. Joining me is Ronline Cannady. Ronline, good morning.
Good morning.
Well, we're going to have some interesting thoughts for you today. Some a subject that seems to be gaining momentum. It's already done some damage in some states, and I call it damage simply because I think when some things are done without all the people weighing in on it, then it damages what's going on. So, what we're going to do is talk about banned or not banned. That is the question. And we want to talk about this movement, I guess you could call it. It's interesting when I put it in that reference, a movement when it's really dictated by those in power, governors of certain states who want to change things for, as they like to say it, the people. And a lot of times when we hear politicians say the people, it doesn't always reference all the people. You notice they never say all the people want this. No, they say the people, which means it's only a segment. And sometimes it's a sliver of a segment, but because certain parties have control of state legislatures and even sometimes Congress, when they say the people, they only mean the people they represent, not all the people. Because if you dealt with things from an all the people perspective, some of the things that they propose probably not would not even get to the floor of these legislators. So today, what we're talking about is this book ban that seems to be gaining more momentum in certain states. And I bring that to us today, Ronline, because being that we're both here in the state of Florida and the governor of the state is doing so much damage as it relates to the educational value of our educational system in the state, where when you start talking about banning books, when you start talking about what should and shouldn't be taught because of either race or gender, you can't be talking about the people, because our society in this day and time in 2023 has become so diverse that we can no longer just look at it through one lens. We have to look at it through multiple lenses. And because of the diversity that our country is experiencing, there has to be more, I believe, of a consideration of all people who are affected and involved. And until that happens, we're going to be fighting this particular situation as it relates to the fact that certain books want to be banned. The certain states have either proposed it, they're waiting for signature, or they have enacted bans on books that relate to gender and relate to culture or race. And three states that lead the way in this charge: Florida, Texas, Pennsylvania. They are probably the three most outspoken. Others are starting to follow in bans of one thing or the other. But this book ban is really becoming a serious issue. What do you think?
You're absolutely right. I just want to put a disclaimer out there. As I was looking through the information that BET um, did their special on back in February for Black History Month, and it's called American in Black. You can look at it from, I searched it out through Google. And what I did learn out of all of the states that are banning, North Carolina is not one of them. So I was proud of that. Not to say that it won't happen. So I
Mm-hmm.
want I wanted to put that disclaimer out there, and that's right now. North Carolina can be proud that their governor is not on the bandwagon for
Yet,
this particular thing as of yet today.
yet.
So hopefully, there's a great reason for that. And I know that North Carolina has been out vigilantly out there, making sure that they put the right people in office to make sure that everything that is going to carry their state forward, that their agenda is met. I learned that through dealing with Candy Smith and Mr. Butterfield. So through them, I'm thankful that I did not see them, that state, in on that bandwagon as of yet. So, um, interesting enough, I came across an article by Kianga Yamhata Taylor in the New Yorker. She is Leon Forrest Professor of African American Studies at Northwestern University and is the author of several books, including Race for Profit: How Banks and Real Estate Industry Undermine Black Home Ownership, which was a 2020 finalist for the Pulitzer Prize for History. So she interviewed Dr. Robin D.H. Kelly, who's a professor of history at UCLA, and notes that there is currently a general assault on knowledge, but specifically knowledge that interrogates issues of race, sex, gender, and even class. And so she did this interview with him on February 1st, and um, there were many points that were brought out. But what he said that got my attention most is there's a ban on Black history. I think Toni Morrison was one of his authors that that he did his curriculum with, and Toni Morrison's part of it was banned. And what he said was he did not see and does not see still to this date of everything that went forward about the lynchings, about um, the many things, the Ku Klux Klan, or any of that being banned. Only our history is being banned. What do you think about that?
So when you say our history, because here again, when we put out
Oh,
words
African
and not,
American history.
okay, when we're not specific about it and we just put it in generalities, then it leaves people to wonder who are they talking about. So when you say Black history is being left out, or Black history books, Black history information, Black history, the history of Blacks, rather. It has to be specific because they're targeting it specifically. It's not just vague, it's very specific. And we have to keep in mind that uh, the people of other cultures who have brown skin, uh, whose history is not as in depth as Black citizens of this country are, they are being targeted too. And they have to understand that because they get targeted, and if there's no one to speak up or speak out about what's going to happen to their history, it gets marginalized or minimized. And once that happens, of course, the power to say anything goes away. So, okay, so Black history is being attacked and minimized. Okay, I think we have to depend on ourselves. It's an interesting thing that we have to understand how this whole system works. When the powers to be favor one particular group over the other and have control of uh, the political structure of a state, of a city, of a country, those people tend to have more of an input. So, excuse me, when we talk about not having power, and because the state house and the legislatures of some states who are driven by Republicans are targeting the minimization of Black history, is like, how can you minimize what is a part of America's history? I mean, you want to leave out a portion and teach that as if the other parts don't exist. It's like, how do you talk about certain parts of certain books without talking about the whole book? Or how do you talk about what happened today if you don't talk about everything that happened today? If you only want to talk about the good parts, then you have an issue. So I think this will be one issue that requires a lot of perhaps protesting or folks understanding how to fight back. When I looked up the number of books that have been banned, 1,145 individual books by 874 different authors have been banned in almost 2,900 schools. This report that comes from Changing America is the title of the article. And Alejandro O'Connell Dominic, Dominic is writing this for this website. And when I'm looking at the fact that you're talking about 2,900 books, I mean schools, 2,900 schools, 2 million students are going to be basically uneducated, uninformed. And here's a breakdown when we talk about these books, Ronline. 22% address issues of race and racism, and 33% address LGBTQ issues or themes. So it's very, very directed toward uh, race and gender. But our culture, our society is becoming so diverse. I don't understand how they feel that doing this is healthy for a country, healthy for a community, healthy for children. And then I don't understand, for instance, in the state of Florida, the ban starts in kindergarten through third grade. I'm trying to understand, why would you be trying to teach or read to a child in kindergarten something that has to do perhaps with gender? I can understand trying to teach some things as it relates to racial issues that may, just be positive. I mean, when you talk about a book such as the book about Rosa Parks, or the young lady that tried to integrate the schools in Arkansas, was it Ruby Brooks? I believe her name was. Those are historical things that happened, and that's one of the things that maybe as young children, because with young children you teach them through repetition, and you do a lot of teaching through song. But when you say kindergarten to third grade, to me that just sounded very young. But I understand it's a process. We're going to start at the low levels and move up through middle school and get it to high schools until we get it all banned and tossed out, and we're only going to teach what we want to teach, and nothing else really happened. But here's the part that's amazing, Ronline. History happens every day. History happens every day. And with social media, with computers, with all this access to technology, how do you suppress? You suppress books, but how do you suppress information that comes across your TV or across your computer? How do you suppress that? You cannot suppress that. So the books part, okay, that's one one area to understand. We have to find a way to fight, but How do you stop history from happening? History is going on today. How do you stop that? Are they not going to talk about the fact that for the first time in the history of this country, a former president is being indicted of crimes? Are you going to just wipe that out of the history books? Are we going to teach that part or not? What do you think? Are we going to teach that part? Because all the other stuff, you want to take out. Are we going to take out the bad parts about things like this? I mean, it's crazy.
And you're absolutely right about that. And it just makes me think about, because we've been talking about this for at least a year, I want to say, of waiting on this indictment to come. But it's interesting to me that the indictment isn't about all of the things that really affect the things that the former president has been doing all of the time. It's, they're shedding light on this woman of, with the campaign and that kind of thing. But it's so many other things that he has done, you know. And with that being said, it just brings back to what Dr. Kelly said. He said, I would just amplify everything you said. Well, no, let me just go here. It says, we're not just interrogating our lives, we're interrogating knowledge production itself. And this is the thing that frustrates me, he said. I keep reminding people that when we look at what is being banned, it's not racist literature, not anti-racist literature. I've never seen any books banned against Thomas Jefferson's Notes on the State of Virginia, or John C. Calhoun, or Edmund Ruffin's The Political Economy of Slavery, or Samuel Cartwright, George Fitzhugh, Louis Agassiz. They wrote straight up scientific racism that has been discredited. And yet, those books are not being banned. What's being banned is Toni Morrison. And I'm not saying those racist books need to be banned. We need to read it. We need to know it. But as they are not books being banned, what does that tell us? So with that, when I read that, and then he also talked about Ron DeSantis, they're saying, oh, well, maybe Mr. DeSantis needs to read, our history and be able to understand. He said he went to the, I think it was Yale University. He went there. He got his law degree. He read about all of those histories. He knows better. So it's not about that, it's his political agenda. And if he wants to be president, he needs to say he wants to be president. But if he becomes president, and the things that he has already been able to do here in the state of Florida, with him being head of the country at that point, we are in trouble. And with all of the states that's already on board, a lot of them has been banned. I was really shocked about the ban that has taken place in Louisiana, of all places. So with all of these wars that's going on, and we're tied up into, um, I guess you're saying, distracted, then the things that's going to come while we're just being distracted with this is going to be far worse than what we can imagine.
Well, things have the opportunity to become far worse. Things have the opportunity to become far better. But since we're on the negative side of some of this, and we're talking about these book bans, the Department of Education put out a statement from their press secretary saying that the state of Florida does not ban books. There's not a list of banned books. Uh, the Department of Education in the state of Florida is making the statement that any bare bookshelves in a media center classroom are simply staged for political messaging. But here's the other part to this that we have to look into when we talk about book bans and you brought up so many points about those books written by people like a Thomas Jefferson and other people during that particular generation who whose books have not been taken off the shelves, who talk about slavery, who talk about other things that happen as it relates to the impact of people of color in this country. Those aren't being taken off the bookshelf. So again, we do see it's a very what would you say? It's slanted one way. These books are good, these books are not good. This information is good, this information is not good. But again, I go back to my point about the fact that, you know, with history being made on a regular basis, and because the young people who are of high school age and in college are part of this real-time history, they will be the authors of the new books that are being written. They will be the authors of what will be impacted from the standpoint of books that will be used and not used, and their offsprings. They I believe our younger generation really is understanding and seeing so much now with the way history is doing things that they will make this change, because for this current uh, governmental assault to be used to say what books should and shouldn't be used or put in our schools, it just convolutes everything. So again, we talk about real-time history happening yesterday, real-time history happening today, real-time history that will happen tomorrow. It's going to be written about, and rather than finding ways to put a positive spin on it, they only want to look at how negative the spin can be. And because it may have realistic overtones or realistic information, because our real history is real, you can't deny and change the fact that these things happen. Yes, Thomas Jefferson did have slaves. That's a point. So did George Washington. Uh, and several other presidents probably had slaves, but we don't even have to go back that far. We don't even have to go back that far. If we just deal with the last 50 to 60 years, and you got to think too that there are more black authors coming about, more black authors for children books and nonfiction books and historical books that black authors are starting to pen and publish. It's going to be very interesting going forward. And unfortunately, too, Ronline, in the state of Florida, if a teacher is found to be teaching from books that have been banned, that becomes a felony, and they can be arrested and put in jail and be titled a felon for wanting to teach something that is historical. It happened, and they're just wanting to bring light to it. So this whole process, again, when we talk about the people, what like sometimes individuals say, what people are you talking about? What people are you representing? Because the majority of the people, and I think that's one of the things that gets lost in this whole process. A country that's built on democracy, but yet the democracy of a state like Florida, Texas, Pennsylvania, the democracy, if the majority, because that's what the democracy is, the majority of the people, if they don't want it, how is it still in place just because you have control of the political house? Well, you see, it goes from the people, all the people make up a state, but then when you elect your officials, they become your voice and your representation and say, well, my people or the people. It's like, no, because you beat out who somebody else wanted and you take on a different challenge. So the whole thing is becoming very, it's unfortunate that it has political overtones. Um, in something that was written in Education Week, they're indicating that districts should have written policy for development of materials and books that are going to be put in the libraries of schools. They're suggesting that if there is a committee that's going to be used to identify which books will and will not be, let it be a very diverse committee. Don't just let it be those of your people who have the same interests as you. Make it diverse enough so it represents everyone, so all voices can be heard. But banning these books, even wanting to take it to the collegiate level, college level, and threatening professors at colleges for teaching certain things because you've made it law. It just smacks of some real negative things going on. And how do you combat this at this particular time? It can and will be changed over time, but right now, this is what we're facing.
You're absolutely right. And I also wanted to bring out, based on what you were saying, Dr. Kelly brought something up. He said, we have outright conservatives, sometimes just actually confessed white supremacists who are teaching at all levels. Stanley Kurtz, who wrote that article, was a professor. He got a PhD and he's writing for a partisan publication, but his credentials are not in question. In fact, he not only is doing that, but he is doing something neither of us is doing. He's writing legislation, literally writing legislation for states to ban critical race theory. Kurtz acknowledged that a Texas critical race theory or CRT law was partly based on model legislation author. So with this kind of thing that's happening, and as you see what's happening in the colleges and the universities, um, the educators are speaking out about, if they teach this or if they teach that, things that actually happen, um, what's going to happen to them? They're going to be faced with fines. I mean, actually coming out of the pocket, as well as being jailed, losing their jobs, and things like that. So, is this not like what's been happening all along throughout American history? To wherein the reason why we've had all of these national wide massacres that has taken place throughout the years. The one particularly in Oklahoma, where it was called the Black Wall Street, to where their businesses and their homes were burned to the ground. Many lives were lost. So are we trying to erase all of that? We can't erase history, just like we can't erase what is unfolding to us today of the former president that, first time in history. So I wonder, how are they going to gloss over that in the history books? How are they going to actually gloss over what happened to the many men and women who were thrown in these graves and now it's paved over? How can you erase that?
Well, you can't erase it. I mean, it's not possible to erase it. You can't white it out. Excuse the pun. You can't white it out. They just want it to be minimized. They
Mhm.
want to put things in place so that if you go beyond a certain point, that you will be punished. And that's unfortunate because the last bastion of freedom in this country is called colleges and universities. This is where a lot of research, a lot of important decisions about moving forward in the realms of academia, in science, and things of that nature are being done. You can't minimize the fact that if, for instance, one of the scientists who helped invent a vaccine for COVID is a black scientist and a black doctor. You're going to wipe that out. You're going to block that out. You're going to say that she didn't do this. Uh, so they're specific when they talk about certain things. I think from a gender perspective, but when they talk about it from a race perspective, it becomes a lot more broader because you spread it out a lot further. I think it goes deeper for gender, but it's wider. It's wider when we talk about Black history. Well, Ronline, I want to just quickly, before we get into the last part of our show, bring up the fact that this is the Kitchings Table, heard every Tuesday morning here on WBIS LFM 106.9. You can catch us on Roku, GPAC 23, Facebook Live, and YouTube if you want to watch us later in the day. But every Tuesday morning, we want to bring you what we feel are important topics or subject matter. And today we're talking banned or not banned. That is the question. The book ban situation here in this country and where it's going and where it's going to end up. But here's the thing about a country and that they love to call the experiment of this democracy. You can't keep a good man down. You're not going to be able to keep this going on for too much longer because it's everything's going to surface and rise up, and the generations to come are going to be the change agents in how laws are going to be done in the future. Uh, they're going to change some things, and I made a point, Ronline, to say when we talk about things that are banned in America, okay, and because we're talking about the fact that you want to ban, here's the interesting point: you want to ban things that relate to education, educating of the mind. You want to ban things that relate to educating a person's mind, their intelligence, their knowledge, their wisdom. You want to ban that. What other things are banned in this country that could be a detriment? Because yes, there are some things on some books that are detriments, but what they're talking about is not the detriment when we talk about it from a different perspective. So I just want to put a couple of things out about what things are a detriment. So harmful chemicals, there are bans on harmful chemicals, uh, things that you shouldn't take into your body, harmful chemicals that pesticides and things like harmful chemicals. That those some of those things are banned. There's some medicines that are banned. They're not good for you. Uh, and there are a lot of bans that cross from coast to coast. However, let's just look at one ban versus another ban. You want to ban education, books, but you're slow to want to ban assault rifles and weapons and ammunition that kill people. You're not very aggressive with that particular ban, but you want to ban Toni Morrison's book or you want to ban some other books that have been written about the history of this country, but you don't want to write about or you don't want to put in the law banning these weapons of destruction. And I think the wake up call has happened with the incident in Nashville. But again, all of these things are going to be written about. They're all going to be written about. That's the thing that these folks don't get, I don't think. And maybe it's me and maybe it's you, but you can't stop the writing that happens because history is made every day. You may
Yeah,
not like what happens. You may not agree that, what happened with a George Floyd or a Tyree uh, Nicholson is what you want people to read about, but it's already out there. If a parent wants to teach their child something on the internet or keep them from reading something on the internet, that's their choice. And another thing I picked up on was this thing about this parents' rights law that has been enacted. You want that law to be in effect for some parents. It doesn't affect all parents in a positive way. Some parents are not in favor of what you have crafted into law from a parent's rights. And And from the standpoint of, if one parent objects to a book being in a classroom, then you're going to take it out because one parent objected, or because something was being taught in one class and that parent objected, then you're not going to teach it because one parent, or one student rather, also objected to something that was taught in the class. One student versus 19 other students. 19, I thought this was democracy. So one versus 19 and one wins. These are the things that we're dealing with in this day and time.
You're so on course with that because what plagued me today in today's headlines for the state of Florida is we are now permitted to carry arms without having to have a permit. You still have to have a background check, of course. But this is the same person who signed that into a bill or what have you, but banning books about African American history or minimizing what's taught for African American history. But now anyone can go that can pass a background check can have a gun on their person. So, what clear message are you sending us, Ron DeSantis? That would be my question to him. You know, you're trying to ban history, but for African Americans not to learn about where they've come from, what they need to do in order to be a productive citizen, in order to carry this country forward, to be a part of the production of this country. And yet, with all of the things that has happened, people are standing up about getting these assault rifles off of the assault anything off of the street, out of the hands of mass destruction that's happening.
Well, again, because things are so politically charged, and because everything has this political taint to it, you want people to be able to walk around carrying a weapon, not worrying about having to have a permit, not worrying about, where you carry it, how you carry it. You're saying that, you know they don't even have to have the training. You have to take a test, written test. You have to take a physical test. You have to have your eyes checked. There are a few things you have to do in order to get a license to drive a car. To drive a car, but you don't have to have anything, no training, no license, no nothing now to carry a firearm if you so choose to. So this also is one of the things that continues to cloud issues as it relates to, you ban books, but you won't ban weapons. That's why I was saying, how do you make and justify that process? You want to ban the books, you want to ban opportunities for teaching and educating certain people, black people in specific, but it's okay for folks to have weapons to I think they want to say, well, it helps with protection, but we know better than that. And again, when we talk about the fact that you have things on the law books as it relates to the situation, that's the parents' rights law, and 32 states across the country have embraced this particular law where parents are given more power to determine what should and shouldn't be done, and not to say they shouldn't have some input. But again, when we talk about who finally makes that decision, so if there are 20 parents of students in a room and 15 of the parents are in favor of a particular book being used to teach, but 5 are against. The 5 win and the book comes out because they don't like what's in the book. You mentioned Ron DeSantis being a graduate of Ivy League school, and he should know better, and he should have read some things. Well, he reads, or he read what he chose to read. He does not. I don't think he's a very learned man from the standpoint of knowing all that he could know. I think he knows just enough to, in this day and time, satisfy those people who want to align with him to make it happen. But again, when you represent your state, when you represent your country, when you represent your city, uh, council districts, and you say you represent the people, that's a very slanted comment because the people are not always all the people. So with this book ban, and I don't think in the history of this country has there ever been such a situation where books are being banned simply because it's teaching people or giving people the opportunity to learn about other people and their cultures. That's the sad part. We are a country full of immigrants. The country is full of immigrants. You have a statue that welcomes immigrants to this country. People come here because they want to be a part of something that they believe to be good and wholesome and right and free. But you want to minimize the teaching of every, not everything, but about as much positive uh, information you can share with everyone's culture. Everyone's culture should have an opportunity to be talked about, discussed, given a story. You shouldn't just say, well, here's a one sentence thing and it is overshadowed by everything else. You can't continue to say that Columbus discovered America. That hasn't held up. You can't keep painting this picture one-sided with a broad brush and think that it works for everyone because that's not who this country is anymore.
Mhm.
Diversity, as it was at the turn of 1900s, diversity had launched itself to this country. It continues to have a launching to this country. So if we were to do the opposite of what they're doing in banning, if books are negative, then fine. If they're harmful, fine. But if they're just sharing the history of what happened, things that actually happened, then we've got a long ways to go in order to change. But the change will come. It may not come in my lifetime or your lifetime. It may not come where we can appreciate it, but uh, the new generation is making mental notes and writing names and writing things down because they will change the complexity of this country as it relates to diversity, and those people who don't see it from a broader, diverse standpoint will be minimized.
Yes, you're absolutely right. The article that I read dealing with Dr. Robin Kelly, he just brought so many points out to the forefront. When everyone wants to, that's against, that's with this movement, should I say, or against us learning, against African Americans learning about their history, against anyone learning about their history where it comes to the adversity of the truth of what we've been dealing with all of these centuries.
Mm-hmm.
So getting to the part where, how do we overcome this? It goes back to all of our segments that we've been doing is talking about the educational piece. to be able to get to that point to where we're learning about it as he stated. You need to know it, you need to learn it, you need to be able to read it to be able to understand what you're going to do, how you're going to make things better, what are you going to teach your next generations, how to be able to create wealth, what you need to do in order to get into those areas of industries to wherein you can bring wealth into your community. That's what it's all about at the end of the day. As in being able to teach, to be able to help your generations to put a distance between the past and be able to have something to look forward to in the future. So when we're talking about banning books, when we're talking about suppressing histories, when we're talking about making sure that what's happening in the private schools to help their children, in the private sector to be able to um, receive the better wages because they're better educated, and the fact that they are no longer being regulated, if you will, the way that public school system is now being regulated to be suppression. What do you have 100 years from now? We already know what that looks like. When I think about 1776, that's something that we're supposed to be so proud of, our Independence Day of 1776. Well, people were still in slavery until 1863. So we're talking about almost 100 years before when the 1776 came along. African Americans wasn't in that equation. And to talk about what's happening today, we have to put ourselves into that equation.
Well, I agree with you. So as we get ready to close, because the things you speak about or spoke about as it relates to being in an equation, again, we have to speak up and speak out. And that's part of the dilemma that we deal with. We choose to be laid back as opposed to speaking out. We tend to wait on someone else to do something instead of being assertive and aggressive and being forward thinking. So we have to, as we continue to say, do for ourselves in order to make some things happen.
And bring your books back home. That's how, bring your books back home and
Right.
teach
Right.
your
Because
generation.
you can ban the books. You can ban the books in the schools. You can't ban them in the bookstores.
Mhm.
Okay. You can't ban the books in the bookstores. You can't stop stuff that's going to be written and put on the internet. So there are ways to get around what they're wanting to do. And as a parent, it is your job to uh, be the monitor, be the liaison, be the person to fight for your child's rights. When your child is doing something positive and good, fight for them. When your child is doing something negative and bad, correct them, but still fight for them because, again, they are just children, and children will, as we all have, made mistakes.
Yes.
But when we talk about teaching and gathering information, then that's something else. So, Ronline, I want to highlight or spotlight something real quick before we close out today. I ran across this uh, in something on the internet, and it comes from a website called the Black Wall Street Times, and it mentions the fact that a 9-year-old little black girl by the name of Bobby Wilson was honored by Yale University. 9 years
Okay.
old, she was honored by Yale University because she did a project that involved research and data collection in her hometown of Caldwell, New Jersey, to target the invasive spotted lanternfly, which is like a butterfly, and she put together information and data and basically was finding ways to eradicate this intrusive bug.
Mm.
A 9-year old little black girl taking on the charge of being a scientist. That is important because when our children find what they truly enjoy and have passions for, we must nurture it and move it forward, no matter who says we shouldn't. Push it forward. And for Yale University to want to honor Bobby Wilson for doing something as important as wanting to eradicate an intrusive insect that could harm communities and vegetation and things of that nature, she must be applauded. Because at 9 years old, you want to do something like that, little girl, young lady, hats off to you. So, Bobby Wilson, you're our hero of the day because you're doing some positive things. And Bobby, write your book, baby. Write your book because it's going to happen. So, Ronline, it's definitely been a joy today to be with you here on WBIS 106.9 FM, WBIS LP. You can catch this show, The Kitchings Table, Tuesday mornings at 10 a.m. here on YouTube, Facebook Live, Roku, and GPAC 23. But I hope that today's banned or not banned comments on this book ban issue, because if you're an author, keep writing books. If you want to be an author, learn how to write a book. If you love to read books, keep reading books and buying books. Build libraries in your homes, as you stated, Ronline. That's what you were really saying. Build your libraries in your house, and you don't have to worry about what somebody's telling you, your children or whatever at school about. Well, that wasn't in the history book. Well, somebody wrote about it. Somebody got some history about it, because history is being made every day.
That's right. I want to see children's book clubs that rises up out of this thing.
Okay, well, don't say stuff like that, because somebody said, "Well, when Miss Cannady, when you gonna start the children's book club? We're gonna start the book club with you. Let you
Right.
start a children's book club." But I agree, there needs to be more book clubs for children so they can be engaged in reading, so they can get knowledge and wisdom. Well, that's going to do it for us today here on the Kitchings Table. We hope you've enjoyed our show. Don't forget to catch us next Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. here on WBISLP 106.9 FM, Awesome Radio, for the Kitchings Table. I'm Earl Kitchings saying so long for now. And my co-host, Ronline Cannady, thank you so much again. And until next Tuesday, have a great weekend. As always, do something positive and good for somebody else. Take care.
Thank you, and it's my pleasure.